I should have seen the signs. Looking back, now it was all so obvious. The extra-long phone calls Olivia always took in the other room. The hushed whispers between her and her two best friends, Maya and Rachel. Even the way they insisted on planning this trip themselves, claiming they wanted to surprise me with a stress-free getaway. I thought it was. Love, turns out, it was an ambush. We had been in this tropical paradise for 5 days, soaking up the sun, enjoying 5-star meals and making memories. Or so I thought it was the kind of vacation people dream about. And I let my guard down, thinking this was the reward for all my hard work. On our last night, Olivia suggested we go out for drinks at a private lounge. They had found it was a little off the beaten path, tucked away from the busy tourist spots. She had smiled so sweetly when she asked me to go, her fingers tracing the rim of her cocktail glass, as she said, "Let's make tonight special." I was blind to the venom behind her words. The lounge had this dim, intimate lighting, the kind that made everything feel surreal. We sat in a corner, Booth, my wife on one side, her two best friends across from us. They laughed, sipped their drinks, leaned into each other like schoolgirls with a secret. I should have paid attention when Maya kept refilling my glass, her eyes darting to Olivia, like they were waiting for something. I should have questioned why Rachel was so insistent that I tried the imported whiskey, saying, "Come on, James, just one more. It's your last night here." I remember taking a sip, the burn of the alcohol smooth but heavier than usual. A slow haze settled over me, my vision blurring at the edges. My limbs felt weighted, my thoughts sluggish. I tried to speak, but my tongue wouldn't cooperate. That's when Olivia leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Survive this, genius." Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, I was sprawled across a stained motel mattress, my body aching like I had been hit by a truck. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Stale beer sweat, something foul lingering in the air. It took me a few seconds to realize I wasn't in our luxury hotel suite anymore. Panic set in as I sat up too fast, the room spinning violently around me. My mouth was dry, my head pounding. My hand instinctively went to my pocket for my phone, but there was nothing. My wallet gone, my watch gone. I patted my jacket, Jackie T, my jeans, every inch of fabric on me. But the truth hit fast and hard. They took everything. My passport, my credit cards, my cash. They stripped me down to nothing and left me here like discarded trash. And then the final knife to the gut. My phone propped up on the nightstand, playing a video Olivia's voice. She was in the front seat of a car, laughing, her sunglasses perched on her head, as if this was just another fun girls' trip. Maya was driving Rachel in the back seat, both of them cackling like hyenas. "Hey, babe," Olivia said, her face filling the screen. "By the time you see this, we'll be long gone. Hope you enjoy your stay. Oh, and don't worry about the hotel bill. They'll be looking for you soon." Maya leaned in, grinning. "Maxed out all your cards. James, you're officially broke. Have fun figuring this out." And Rachel, with that smug little smirk, delivered the final blow. "Survive this, genius." Then the screen went black for a long moment. I just sat there staring at my own reflection in the cracked motel mirror. Across the room, I looked like a man who had just been buried alive and clawed his way out of the dirt. I felt a familiar burn rise in my chest. Not panic, not fear. Rage. They thought this was the end of me. They thought I'd curl up and accept my fate. They were dead wrong. I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths, pushing the anger aside. Anger wouldn't get me out of this. I needed to think first. I checked the nightstand drawers, the bathroom, even under the bed. nothing useful. The motel room was as cheap as they come. No minibar, no phone, not even a pen and paper. I stumbled to the window, peering out at the unfamiliar streets below. It wasn't the tourist district anymore. This was the side of paradise. They didn't put in the brochures, the part where people like me ended up, if they weren't careful. I needed to get out of here. But I had no money, no ID, and no way to call for help. The receptionist downstairs would recognize me, and without paying for the room, I'd have to sneak out if they caught me. I'd be dealing with local authorities, and that was the last thing I needed. I walked to the door, pressing my ear against it. Silence. I took a slow breath and twisted the knob. It creaked open. The hallway was dimly lit, the carpet stained and peeling at the edges. My feet moved on. Instinct. Careful quiet. I made it to the stairwell without running into anyone, my pulse thundering in my ears. Step by step, I crept down to the lobby. The receptionist was an older man, half asleep behind the desk, a small radio playing soft, scratchy music. A single security camera hung above him, its red light blinking. I couldn't afford to be seen. My only option was to time it perfectly. I waited until a guest walked in, distracting the receptionist, just enough for me to slip past the desk and out the front door. The warm night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop moving. I walked fast, head down, blending into the crowd. I had no money, no phone, no plan. But I had one thing, a reason to fight. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming for them. I walked for what felt like miles, my body moving on pure instinct while my mind reeled from the betrayal. Olivia, Maya, and Rachel had played me like a fool, stripping me down to nothing in a foreign country with no lifeline. No way out. The warm night air should have been comforting, but every unfamiliar street, every face I passed only drove home how lost I truly was. I needed a plan. I needed to survive. The problem was survival didn't come easy when you had nothing. Not a dollar to your name, not even the luxury of making a single phone call. And worst of all, I had no idea where I was. I stopped at the corner of a busy street, the glow of neon signs flickering against the pavement. The city pulsed around me. Motorcycles weaving between honking cars. Vendors shouting their last deals before closing up for the night. Groups of people laughing as they stumbled out of bars. A whole world moving forward, completely indifferent to the fact that my entire life had just been turned upside down. I glanced down at myself, my wrinkled button-up, now damp with sweat, my dress shoes scuffed from the endless walking. The realization had it hard. I didn't just look like a man who had been robbed. I looked like I didn't belong, and in a place like this, that made me a target. I caught a few lingering stares. Two men smoking near a food cart, a woman seated on a bench eyeing me too long. I wasn't sure if they saw a desperate tourist or an easy mark, but I couldn't afford to stick around and find out. I turned down a quieter street, my mind racing. I needed to find a way back to the United States. That meant finding help. But who in their right mind would help a penniless foreigner with no proof of identity? Then, an idea struck. I had been here before, not in this exact country, but in situations where I had to rely on my instincts, where I had to think like a man with no safety net. Before I built my business, before the success, I had spent years in the military. Years that taught me how to survive under pressure I had been trained to adapt to. Think on my feet. Olivia and her friends thought they had left me helpless, but they underestimated me. I wasn't going to beg for help. I was going to earn it. Finding the first step. I kept scanning for opportunities. Hotels were out of the question. They'd require payment up front. Even worse, without an ID, I could end up locked in a holding cell until someone decided what to do with me. That left only one option: the streets. I spotted a man selling souvenirs near a row of outdoor bars, his stand filled with handcrafted necklaces, carved wooden figures, and colorful fabrics. He looked exhausted, his eyes drooping as he lazily arranged his display. An idea formed in my head. I approached him, keeping my hands visible. Last thing I wanted was for him to think I was a thief. "Do you need help closing up?" I asked in careful, deliberate English. He looked at me, frowning. "You buy something?" I shook my head. "No money, but I can help you pack up for the night." His frown deepened, but then his eyes shifted past me, toward the group of drunks laughing near his stand. Tourists. Easy distractions for pickpockets. He sighed and nodded toward a stack of folded cloth. "Put these in the bag." I moved quickly, folding and packing as he closed the stand. It wasn't much, but it was something. A sign that I wasn't just some lost fool wandering the streets. When we finished, he gave me a once-over. "You work?" I nodded. "I need work." He hesitated, then pulled out a handful of small bills, barely enough for a meal, but it was something. "Come back tomorrow. Maybe I need help again." I took the money with a nod of thanks, already scanning the street for my next move. Food, shelter, and a plan. With a few dollars in my pocket, I found a small street vendor selling rice and grilled chicken, handing over just enough for a single portion. I ate slowly, my mind racing through my next steps. Shelter was the biggest issue. I needed somewhere safe, somewhere I wouldn't wake up to find myself robbed again. As I wandered, I spotted an old church near the edge of the district. Its doors, open to the public churches I remembered from my travels, often allowed people to sleep inside, especially those down on their luck. I stepped inside, the scent of old wood and burning candles greeting me. A few people sat scattered across the pews, some lost in prayer, others simply resting. I found a quiet corner near the back and sat down, exhaustion washing over me. I had survived the first night, but this wasn't over. A morning of hard choices by dawn. I was already up, my muscles sore from sleeping against the wooden few. The city was different. In the early hours, quieter but just as busy. Vendors set up for the day. Workers hurried to their jobs. And for the first time since waking up in that motel, I felt a sense of clarity. I couldn't stay in this cycle of barely getting by. I needed real help, and fast. I had one lead, an old business acquaintance, Victor, who had mentioned having contacts in this country. We weren't close, but I knew where to start looking. The only problem finding Victor, me getting access to a phone and a way to call him, and that meant finding another way to make money fast. The first step toward home. By midday, I was back on the streets, offering my help wherever I could. Unloading deliveries, moving furniture for a small shop owner, even sweeping in front of a cafe. It wasn't much, but by the afternoon I had enough to pay for a short session at an internet cafe. I logged into an old email account and searched through my past contacts, scanning for Victor's last message. My heart pounded as I found his number, taking a deep breath. I borrowed a few more coins from my earnings and dialed the number. It rang, and then James Victor's voice was cautious, confused. I exhaled sharply. "Victor, I need your help." The game was about to change. I wasn't out of the woods yet, but I had taken the first step, and Olivia and her friends had no idea that their little game was about to take a very, very dark turn. Victor's silence on the other end of the line stretched for a moment longer than I liked. I could hear faint sounds in the background, voices, the clicking of a keyboard, the occasional burst of laughter. He was in an office, which meant I had caught him during work hours. Good. It meant he wouldn't be able to make excuses or brush me off. "James," his voice came through again, this time laced with cautious disbelief. "Man, I haven't heard from you in years. Where the hell are you calling from?" I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth, gripping the borrowed phone a little tighter. I'm in trouble, Vic. I'm stranded in your country with no money, no passport, and no way out. I need your help. A sharp inhale. Damn, what happened? I hesitated. I could have launched into the full betrayal, told him about Olivia and her scheming friends, about how they had left me drugged and robbed in a motel. But the truth was, I didn't have time for pity. What I needed was a solution. Long story, I said, instead. But I need a way to get back to the St. Dates. Do you still have those connections in the consulate? Victor sighed heavily. Not as many as I used to. Things changed since we last talked, but I might know someone who can help. Where are you now? I glanced around the dingy internet cafe, the rows of outdated computers, the tired-looking owner eyeing me, waiting for his payment somewhere. I can't stay for long. I need to move all right. There's a bar near the business district called El Toro. Ask for Luis. Tell him Victor sent you. He's not the friendliest guy, but he owes me a favor. A bar, not exactly the kind of place I wanted to put my trust in. But right now, I didn't have the luxury of options. Got it. Thanks, Vic. I owe you. You already owed me. Victor muttered, then added, Be careful, James. This place isn't exactly kind to desperate men. I hung up and exhaled slowly. Time to move the road to Louise. I used the last of my borrowed change to pay the cafe owner and stepped out into the midday heat. The sun bored down mercilessly, and the streets pulsed with life. Vendors, shouting cars, honking people rushing past. El Toro was about 3 miles away, a long walk in the heat. But taking a cab wasn't an option with no money, no ID, and no backup plan if this went sideways. I had to keep my head down and rely on my instincts. As I walked, I kept an eye on my surroundings. I wasn't being paranoid. I knew I stood out, a lone foreigner, clear, not a tourist wearing wrinkled clothes and moving with purpose. I might as well have been a walking target. At one point, I noticed a group of young men lingering near a street corner, their eyes following me a little too long. I didn't break my stride, but I adjusted my path, weaving into a more crowded area. Rule number 1 of survival: never make yourself an easy mark. By the time I reached El Toro, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows over the narrow alleyways. The bar wasn't much to look at. Worn-down signage, graffiti on the walls, and a bouncer built like a brick wall standing at the entrance. I approached him carefully. I'm looking for Liz. The bouncer barely acknowledged me. Not my problem. I tried again. Victor sent me. That got a reaction. The bouncer's eyes flicked over me, sizing me up before jerking his head toward the door. Inside, I stepped in, adjusting to the dim lighting. The air smelled of stale beer and sweat, the murmur of low conversations blending with the hum of an old jukebox in the corner. The place wasn't packed, but there were enough people to make it clear. This was a regular haunt for those who live by their own rules. At the bar, a man, in his late 40s, sat nursing a drink. He had sharp eyes, a thick mustache, and an expression that told me he didn't have time for nonsense. Louise, I approached, keeping my movements calm. Louis, he didn't look up. Depends who's asking. Victor sent me. That got his attention. His gaze lifted, studying me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. You look like you've had a bad week. You have no idea, I muttered. Louis motioned to the stool next to him. Sit. I did. What do you need? He asked. Slow, a way out of this country. Louis let out a dry chuckle. Not easy. Not cheap. I exhaled. I don't have money, but I can work. He tilted his head. Work, huh? What kind of work? I met his gaze. Whatever gets me out of here. For a long moment, Louise didn't say anything. Then he downed the rest of his drink and leaned in slightly. There's a man who needs a driver. Not exactly legal, but it pays. You do this. You'll have enough for a passport and a ticket. I didn't hesitate. I'll do it. Louise smirked. Thought you might. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. Then he turned back to me. Be here tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. I nodded. I'll be here. Louise stood stretching. One more thing. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. He gave me a look that sent a chill down my spine. Don't screw this up with that. He walked off, leaving me alone at the bar. I had a job, a plan, and for the first time since waking up in that motel, I had hope. But something in Lewis's tone told me this job wasn't going to be simple, and if I messed up, I wouldn't be leaving this country at all. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I was alone in a foreign country. My wife had robbed me blind, and the only shot I had at survival was a job I knew nothing about, offered to me by a man who looked like he wouldn't hesitate to put a bullet in someone if they stepped out of line. But I didn't have a choice. So I spent the night the only way I knew how, preparing. I found a public restroom, washed my face, straightened my clothes as best as I could. I walked the streets, listening, watching how people moved. I picked up on accents, hand gestures, body language. I studied the way the locals blended into the background, how they avoided eye contact with the wrong people by the time the sun cracked the horizon. I was ready, or at least as ready as a man in my position could be. I arrived at El Toro at exactly a.m. Luis was already there, standing outside with a cigarette between his fingers. He didn't say anything when he saw me, just took a slow drag, exhaled the smoke and nodded toward a dusty black SUV parked at the curb. Get in. I didn't hesitate. Once I was inside, Luis got behind the wheel and a second man I hadn't noticed before slid into the passenger seat. He was younger than Luis, maybe mid-30s, sharp eyes, a deep scar running from his temple down to his jaw. He looked at me the way a man sizes up a dog at a fight, trying to decide if I had bite or if I was just another stray waiting to be put down. This? The guy he asked, Liz. Luis nodded. James, meet Felix. Felix didn't offer a handshake. He just kept staring at me. You know how to drive. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. That earned a small smirk. We'll see. Lewis pulled the car onto the road, taking a route that led us out of the city and into the outskirts. The buildings thinned out, replaced by dirt roads and scattered houses. No one said a word for a while. Then Lou spoke. Here's the job, he said, eyes fixed on the road. You're going to be our driver. We have some deliveries to make. You don't ask questions. You don't look inside the packages. You don't speak unless spoken to. Get us where we need to go, and we'll make sure you get what you need. Simple, at least on paper. I nodded, understood. Felix scoffed. We'll see about that, too. The first job, we reached our first stop about an hour later. It was a small rundown warehouse, the kind of place you wouldn't look twice at if you were just passing by. The windows were boarded up, the paint peeling. A single man stood outside smoking, his face unreadable. Liz parked the car and turned to me. Stay here. Felix and Lewis got out, walking toward the man, exchanging a few quick words before heading inside. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to stay still, to look calm, but my mind was racing. What exactly were we delivering? Drugs? Weapons? Stolen goods? It didn't matter. What mattered was getting paid, getting my fake passport, and getting on a plane before Olivia and her friends even realized I was alive. The minutes dragged, then a loud thud in the trunk. Luis and Felix walked back quickly, getting into the car with urgency. Drive, Liz said. I didn't ask why I didn't look back, I just hit the gas. We tore down the dirt road, dust kicking up behind us. In the rearview mirror, I saw the warehouse door burst open. 2 men ran out. One of them had a gun. a gun that was now pointed at us. Felix cursed under his breath faster. I didn't need to be told. Twice I pressed the pedal to the floor, gripping the wheel as the SUV bounced over uneven terrain. Then, bang, a shot rang out. A second later, the back windshield shattered. Felix turned, gun already in hand, firing back. I didn't look. I focused on the road. More shots, more shattering glass. Then, silence. I kept driving until Louis finally said, "Slow down, we're clear." I exhaled, my hands aching from how tightly I had been gripping the wheel. Felix let out a dark chuckle. "Not bad." Liz nodded. "Yeah, not bad at all." I didn't ask what had happened back there. I didn't need to. This wasn't just about deliveries, it was about survival. And I had just proved I was willing to do whatever. It took a step closer to freedom. We made 2 more stops that day. No gunfire, no shattered glass, just exchanges. Bags were passed, money was counted, and I did my job. Drove fast, stayed quiet, and didn't ask questions. By the time we returned to Toro, the sun was setting, the heat of the day finally easing. Luis parked and turned to me. "You did good." Felix leaned back in his seat, smirking. "Didn't panic, like most guys would have." I shrugged, trying to mask how tightly wounded I still felt. Not my first time. Under pressure, Luis studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, tossing it onto my lap. "First payment." I opened it. Cash enough to get me through a few more knives nights. Maybe even buy some new clothes. Get a proper meal, but not enough to leave. Luis must have read my mind. "You do 2 more jobs. You'll have what you need. 2 more. I exhaled, nodded. Felix grinned. "Welcome to the team, James." I didn't respond because I knew this wasn't a team. This was a game, and I had just been dealt in. The problem with choices. That night I found a cheap hostel and paid for a bed. I ate real food for the first time in days. I took a long shower, letting the water wash away the grime, the tension, and then lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. The weight of it all hit me. I had 2 choices: stay in this life a little longer, get my fake passport and leave, or take down the people who did this to me before I go. Because Olivia, Maya, and Rachel, they thought I was dead. They thought I was suffering, stranded, broken. They thought I'd never find a way back. But they were wrong. Because I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to make them pay. And when I was done, I'd be the one laughing. The money from the first job got me through another couple of days, but survival wasn't enough. Every minute spent here was a reminder of what Olivia and her so-called friends had done to me. My anger had cooled into something sharper, something more dangerous. I wasn't just trying to get home anymore. I was preparing for war. But first I had to finish what I started. Louis made it clear I had 2 more jobs before I'd have enough for my fake passport and a ticket out. If that was the price of freedom, I'd pay it. The second job, a test of loyalty. I arrived at El Toro before dawn, just like before. Luisa was waiting at the curb, a fresh cigarette between his fingers. This time Felix wasn't with him. "Where's your guard dog?" I asked. Louise smirked. "Felix doesn't like being woken up early. But you look like you didn't sleep at all." He wasn't wrong. Sleep had been an afterthought since the moment I woke up, abandoned in that motel. "Let's just get this done," I muttered. Luis nodded, flicked his cigarette away, and got into the SUV. I followed the weight of the gun tucked in the glove compartment, suddenly feeling heavier than before. We drove in silence for miles, the city shrinking behind us. The further we went, the rougher the roads became. Finally, we pulled up to a small airstrip. A single plane sat in the middle of the runway, the kind of aircraft used for private cargo transport. A group of men stood near it, engaged in a conversation too far away for me to hear. Lua killed the engine. "This one's different," he said, turning to me. "Bigger deal, bigger risk. You screw up here, there's no coming back from it." I stared at the men near the plane, my gut already telling me what he wasn't saying. "This isn't just about driving, is it?" Lewis shook his head. "No, today you're my insurance." He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a pistol and set it on the dashboard. "You ever use one of these before?" I didn't answer right away. I had been in the military. I had handled weapons, but I wasn't the kind of man who resorted to violence without reason. But right now my reasons were stacking up fast. So I picked up the gun, checking the magazine full. I chambered around and looked at Liz. "What's the job?" Liz grinned. "That's what I like about you, James. You don't ask stupid questions." A deal gone wrong. We got out of the car. Lewis led me toward the group near the plane. His demeanor, shifting into something casual, almost lazy like this, was just another day at work. The man in charge was Eduardo, a stocky guy with a shaved head and sharp eyes. He was flanked by two men, both armed, both watching us closely. Lisa and Eduardo exchanged pleasantries, but I wasn't listening. My focus was on the body language. Something was off. Eduardo was tense. His men were shifting their weight too much, their hands twitching near their weapons. Luis must have noticed too, because his voice dropped an octave. "You have the payment." Eduardo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes about that. I felt the shift before it happened. Eduardo's men reached for their guns. Luis was faster. He pulled his own weapon, and before I could react, the air was filled with the deafening sound of gunfire. I ducked behind a stack of crates, my heart pounding. Luis had dropped one of Eduardo's men instantly, but the other was already firing back. I took a breath. I forced myself to move and fired twice. The second man crumpled. Eduardo turned to run, but Luis was on him, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the plane. "You tried to set me up," Liz hissed, pressing his gun against Eduardo's jaw. Eduardo coughed, his hands raised. "It wasn't my idea. Someone paid me to take you out." Louis's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Eduardo hesitated. Liz clicked the safety off. Eduardo panicked. "Some American woman. She said you were helping a man who shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. An American woman. It had to be Olivia. Louis must have put the pieces together too, because his gaze flicked to me, his smirk returning. Well, James looks like someone's looking for you after all." Shifting priorities. Eduardo didn't make it out of that airstrip alive. Luis didn't say a word about it. Neither did I. We left the bodies behind, got into the SUV and drove back toward the city. But my mind was racing. Olivia knew I was alive, which meant she was trying to stop me from getting back. And if she was willing to pay to have me taken out, that meant she wasn't just trying to run with the money. She was trying to erase me completely. Louise pulled into a back alley and parked, then turned to me, still smirking. "Guess you won't be leaving just yet." I exhaled slowly, the weight of the gun in my lap, reminding me of what had just happened. "No," I said, "not yet." Because now, this wasn't about escape. This was about payback, the final job, making it personal. Luis didn't ask me if I still wanted to work the last job. He already knew my answer. I had one foot in the underworld now, and stepping back out wasn't an option. The last job was supposed to be simple. One more delivery, one more paycheck. But now I had a better idea. I wasn't just going to finish my part and disappear. I was going to use this job to set my own trap. The setup. I spent the next few days learning everything I could. I found out that Olivia and her friends hadn't left the country yet. They were still living it up, spending my money in the most expensive places, thinking I was nothing more than a ghost in their past. They thought I was buried. They thought I was suffering. They thought they had won. I had 2 days before the last job, and in those 2 days, I made sure Olivia knew exactly who she was dealing with. The first warning. Olivia got the first hint when she tried to use one of my stolen credit cards and it declined. Rachel got the second when she stepped out of their hotel to find her rental car missing. Maya. Maya was the lucky one. She was the first to see my face again. I made sure of it. I waited until she was alone, sipping some overpriced cocktail at a rooftop bar. I sat down across from her, took a sip of her drink, and smiled. Miss me? She turned pale. I leaned in, tell Olivia. I whispered, Shaq. Next, Maya scrambled out of her seat, knocking her drink over running. I let her go, because now the real game was just beginning. The moment Maya saw me, I knew the game had changed. Her panic was immediate, her chair scraping against the floor as she bolted from the rooftop bar, nearly knocking over a waiter in her rush to get away. I could have stopped her, but I didn't need to. I wanted her to run. I wanted her to tell Olivia. I picked up her abandoned cocktail, took a slow sip, and smiled. The first shot had been fired. Now the real hunt began, the ripple effect. By the time I left the rooftop, I knew Olivia would be in a state of complete panic. Maya would call her voice-shaking breath ragged. She'd tell her she had seen a ghost. Seen me? Olivia, in her arrogance, had assumed I was either dead or stuck in some nameless back alley begging for scraps. The thought of me thriving, coming after her. That was never part of her plan, which meant she wouldn't react calmly. She'd make a mistake, and I'd be watching when she did the second message. I didn't waste time. That night I tracked down where Olivia and her friends were staying. The Grand Hotel. One of the most expensive resorts in the city, the kind of place with marble floors, a full-time concierge, and drinks that cost more than some people's rent. She was still living like a queen, still using my money to fund her fantasy. Not for long. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there, like I had a reservation waiting for me. I didn't stop at the front desk, didn't make eye contact with the staff. I just moved fast and quiet through the halls until I reached their suite, room 1403. Perfect. I pulled out a hotel envelope I had swiped from the front desk earlier, wrote a short, simple message on the back. Then I slipped it under the door. The note read, "Tried to bury me. Now I'm digging up the truth." Olivia's first mistake. I didn't stick around to watch their reaction. Instead, I found a spot across the street, blending into the crowd, watching the entrance of the hotel. 15 minutes later, Olivia stormed out, her face pale, her movements. Frank, ANC, Maya, and Rachel were right behind her, whispering furiously, looking over their shoulders like I might appear at any moment. I stayed exactly where I was because this fear in their eyes, was better than any confrontation they were starting to unravel. Good. That was the whole point. Disrupting the illusion. Olivia's next move was predictable. She went straight to the bank trying to access her accounts. I had already locked them down. She tried to use one of my stolen credit cards again. Declined. She pulled out her phone, probably to call her new boyfriend, whoever he was. But I had already made sure she wouldn't get an answer. Because the thing Olivia didn't know. I had friends too. And while she had spent her time playing games, I had spent mine making connections. She was about to learn just how powerful those connections were. The setup. Louise had been watching all of this with amusement, you know, he said, leaning back in his chair. When I met you, I thought you were just another desperate man looking for an escape. I smirked, and now Louis chuckled. Now I think you might be more dangerous than the people you're hunting. He wasn't wrong. I had spent weeks surviving, clawing my way back from nothing. Every moment had sharpened me, honed me into something Olivia and her friends could never have predicted. I wasn't just looking for revenge. I was engineering it. And it all came down to the next face. I needed one final job, but this time I wasn't working for Louise. This time Louise was working for me. The grand betrayal. I made Olivia a deal she couldn't refuse. I sent another note, this time to her phone, an anonymous message, just cryptic enough to make her desperate. Meet me at midnight alone, or the whole world will know what you did. I knew she'd come. She had no choice. Because now she wasn't just afraid of me. She was afraid of what I knew. The final play midnight, the meeting point, an abandoned dock on the edge of the city, isolated, quiet, the perfect stage for what came next. I stood there waiting, the night air thick with anticipation. Then footsteps. Olivia stepped out of the shadows. Her face set in, a mask of forced confidence. But her eyes were terrified. She took a slow step forward. James. I tilted my head watching her, letting the silence stretch. She swallowed hard. I don't know what you think is happening here, but save it. I cut in. My voice was calm, too calm. You already know why you're here. She crossed her arms, trying to act unbothered. So what, you're just going to threaten me? What do you even want? I took a slow step forward, watching as she instinctively moved back. Did you really think you could erase me? I asked. Did you think I'd just disappear and let you live happily, ever after, on my money? She clenched her jaw. I don't know what you're talking about. I chuckled. Wrong answer. Before she could speak again, a car pulled up behind her. Louis Felix and two other men she had never seen before. Her breath hitched. Who are they? I smiled. Friends of mine. She took a step back. Then another, eyes darting toward the car, toward the dark water beyond the dock. James, let in. Talk about this. She tried, her voice shaking. Now we can work something out. I folded my arms like the way you worked something out when you drugged me when you left me for dead. She piled. That was James. That was a mistake. We didn't think you'd survive. I finished for her. Yeah, I figured her breathing was ragged. Now I let the silence hang between us. Let her feel the weight of everything she had done. Then I pulled out my phone. I have everything, I said quietly. Proof of what you did. The fraud, the theft, the hit you tried to put on me. Her lips parted. James. I showed her the screen. A video. Maya's confession. Ours confession. The recordings of the bank transactions linking her to every crime. She was finished. Her knees almost buckled. Oh my God. I stepped closer. You don't have a way out of this, Olivia. She was shaking now, desperate. What? What do you want? She whispered. I leaned in close enough for her to hear every word. I want you to feel what I felt. She took a shaky breath. And if I refuse? I smiled. Then you'll spend the rest of your life running the last laugh. In the end, Olivia made the only choice she could. She transferred everything, every cent, back to me. She signed a confession, and then she disappeared. Maybe she thought she was escaping. Maybe she thought she could start over somewhere new. But I wasn't worried because, no matter where she went, I'd always be a step ahead. And that was the real last laugh. I watched Olivia sign her confession with trembling hands, her fingers barely gripping the pen. The once confident, smug woman who had laughed as she abandoned me in a foreign country was now a pale shadow of herself, her breath shallow, her skin clammy under the moonlight. I let the silence stretch. As she finished watching her every move done, she whispered, sliding the paper back toward me. I picked it up, read through every word, and smirked. She had confessed to everything. The fraud, the theft, even the attempt to have me silenced. Her own words, her own handwriting. "You know," I said, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into my pocket. I expected more of a fight. She swallowed hard. "What do you want now?" I took my time before answering, glancing at Louise and Felix, who stood a few steps away watching everything unfold. They were waiting for my next move. So was Olivia. The truth was, I had already won. I had the money. I had the confession. I had destroyed the life. She thought she could build off of my back. But I wanted one last thing. I wanted her to remember this moment for the rest of her life. I stepped closer, leaning in so she could hear every syllable. "You took everything from me, Olivia. My money, my identity, my dignity. You left me to rot while you lived like a queen." I let my voice drop lower. "Now, I'm returning the favor." She flinched. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Maya's voice filled the empty docs, raw and frantic. From our last conversation, Olivia planned everything. It was all her idea. I swear, James, I didn't know she was going to go this far. Then, Rachel's voice cracking with fear. "Please, James, don't come after me. Olivia was the one who wanted you dead, not me." The color drained from Olivia's face. "You always thought you were the smartest in the room," I murmured. "But you didn't see this coming, did you?" She shook her head, eyes darting toward the waiting car. "James, please." I ignored her. "You know what's funny? Maya and Rachel are already gone. They ran. The moment they realized I was alive, left you behind, just like you left me." Her lips trembled. Where are they?" I chuckled. Does it matter? Because the truth was, I didn't need to go after them. They had already destroyed themselves. Chapter. Maya was last seen trying to book a flight under a fake name, desperate to disappear before the authorities caught up with her. Rachel had fled the hotel in tears, her life in ruins. But Olivia, she was still here, and now she was alone. I turned to Louis. "Take her to the airport." Louis raised an eyebrow, and, "If she runs," I smirked, "she won't." Olivia knew there was no escape. She would leave this country in disgrace, broke, powerless, and carrying the weight of her own betrayal. That was worse than any revenge I could have imagined. That was justice. A new beginning. By morning, Olivia was on a one-way flight back to the States, escorted by people who would make sure she didn't disappear. By noon, my fake passport was in my hands. By sunset, I was at the airport myself, walking through security with a quiet, steady confidence I had made it. I was going home. As I sat in the terminal waiting for my flight, I pulled out my phone one last time and scrolled through my messages. I found Olivia's number, the last message she had ever sent me, the one she had laughed about as she drove away, still sat there untouched. "Survive this, genius." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed my reply. Why I had sent, and, as my flight was called, I walked toward my future, leaving Olivia and everything she had done far behind. But I knew deep down she would never escape what she had done, and that was the real last laugh. I stepped off the plane, inhaling the crisp air of home. For weeks I'd been trapped in a foreign land, stripped of everything, forced to claw my way back from the grave Olivia had dug for me. But now I was standing here, back in my country, back in my life. Only it wasn't the same life anymore. Everything had changed. I wasn't the same man who had boarded a flight with his wife thinking he was going on a relaxing vacation. That man had been naive. That man had trusted too easily. That man had died in a cheap motel alone, and abandoned the man who returned. He was something else entirely. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I had gotten my money back. I had forced Olivia to confess. I had ruined the illusion she thought she could live in. But there was still one last thing I needed to do. And for that, I needed to find her. The hunt begins again. I knew Olivia wouldn't go back to our home. That would be too obvious, too predictable. No, she would run, she would hide. She would try to start over somewhere new. But the problem with running, it only works if no one is chasing you, and Olivia had left a trail while I was surviving overseas. I had made connections, some legal, some not so much, and one of those connections had been more than happy to dig into Olivia's movements. The moment she landed back in the U.S., it didn't take long. A flagged hotel transaction, a cash withdrawal, a car rental in a different name, but with her fingerprints all over it. Olivia had made a mistake, and now I had her a surprise visit. The address led me to a small apartment complex on the edge of town. It wasn't luxurious, but it wasn't run down either. Olivia was playing it safe, staying somewhere quiet, somewhere where no one would ask too many questions. She thought she had time. She thought she was safe. She thought I had disappeared forever. I walked up to the door and knocked. Silence, then footsteps, hesitant, cautious. A few seconds later, the peephole darkened as someone looked through it. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Then I spoke. Opened the door. Olivia. A sharp inhale, then nothing. She was debating it, deciding whether to let me in or pretend she wasn't there. I knocked again harder. This time, don't make me ask twice. A pause. Then the slow creak of the door, unlocking. The door swung open just enough for me to see her. Olivia looked like hell. Her hair was a mess, her eyes hollow, dark circles beneath them. She had always been the kind of woman who prided herself on appearances, but now she looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. She swallowed hard. "What do you want?" I stepped inside without asking permission. She flinched but didn't stop me. She knew she couldn't. I scanned the apartment. Bare furniture, half-unpacked suitcases, the smell of stale coffee and desperation hanging in the air. "You're not settling in very well." I noted. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "I don't have time for games, James." I chuckled. "That's funny, because that's all you ever played with me." She looked away. "You got what you wanted. You took everything back. Why are you here?" I studied her for a long moment, then reached into my pocket. I pulled out the confession she had written back at the docks. Her breath hitched. "I never turned it in." I said, letting the paper dangle between my fingers, I could have had you arrested." The moment you landed, her lips parted then. "Why?" "Because prison is too easy." I cut in. "You don't get to rot in a cell where you don't have to think about what you did." "No, Olivia. You're going to suffer the same way. You made me suffer." She took a shaky step back. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Everywhere you go, I'll be there. Every time you try to start over, I'll be watching. You will never feel safe again. You will never have peace again. You will never forget what you did to me." Her breathing became ragged. "Please, James. I was stupid. I was greedy. I didn't." I held up a hand. "Save it. I don't care about your excuses." She wiped at her eyes. "Then what do you want?" I smiled. "I want you to live in fear." And with that, I turned and walked out, because the truth was, I had already won. And now Olivia would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, just like I had.